Imagine you're sitting in the theater watching this sprawling, just completely chaotic battle on screen. The rain is pouring down in these heavy sheets, turning the ground into like a thick sludge.
Oh, yeah.
And the camera is shaking slightly as a horse rears up right in front of you. You're so close to the action that you can almost feel the mud, you know? You feel suffocated by it.
Right. It's incredibly visceral.
Exactly. And you're watching a scene that's cut together in this kinetic frenzy, shot from 4, maybe 5 different angles all at once. And I mean, we take this completely for granted today. But 60 years ago, that visual grammar, it just didn't exist.
No, not at all. It had to be invented.
Right. So whether you prefer, space operas like Star Wars or gritty spaghetti westerns or even like Pixar animations, the visual language you were watching was fundamentally shaped by one single Japanese filmmaker, and that is Akira Kurosawa.
It really sounds like an impossible claim to make about just one person, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like hyperbole.
But it's true. I mean, when you trace the lineage of global cinema, the actual structural DNA of how we tell stories and frame actional roads really do lead back to him.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. For this deep dive, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources. We've got essays from the Smithsonian and the BFI, academic film journals, historical retrospectives, biographies, the works.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to basically figure out how a failed painter transformed himself into the emperor of Japanese cinema. We're going to explore how he essentially invented a brand new cinematic language that bridged the East and the West.
And why his influence is still dictating the pop culture you consume every single day. So to understand how he changed the way movies look and feel, we really have to figure out what shaped his own eyes before he ever picked up a camera, right?
Sure.
Take me back to the beginning. Where does a vision like this even start?
Well, we have to go back to 1910, to what is known as the Taisho period in Japan. And this specific era is vital context because it was this brief, almost fragile window of liberal democracy. It was a time of immense cultural openness where Western ideas were just flooding into Japan.
Right, and this is right before the country hardened into that strict, isolated militarism of the 1930s.
Precisely. So he's born right on this cultural fault line.
Sure.
And you can see that collision directly in his living room, actually. His father, Isamu, came from a very proud samurai lineage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a strict military-trained gymnastics instructor. He ran the house with, absolute iron discipline. But paradoxically, this traditional samurai descendant was just utterly fascinated by the West.
Really?
Yeah, he was the one actively encouraging your kids to go watch American movies and visit the music halls in Tokyo. He truly believed cinema had educational value.
That is, it's so hard to imagine a strict military father in 1910s Japan saying, go to the movies, kids, it's good for you.
Right. It was incredibly rare. And that intellectual curiosity was heavily fed by Kurosawa's older brother, Haigo. Haigo was a massive influence on him.
What did Haigo do?
He worked as a benshi. So in the era of silent films in Japan, a benshi was a live narrator who literally stood beside the movie screen, explaining the plot and doing all the voice acting for the characters on the fly.
Oh, that's fascinating. Because the audiences couldn't read the foreign title cards, right?
Exactly. So through Haigo, young Akira Kurosawa was getting this weekly masterclass in global cinema.
But looking through the sources we have for this deep dive, it seems like Haigo provided something much darker than just, a film education. There's this specific incident in 1923 that apparently scarred Kurosawa for life.
Yes, the Great Kanto earthquake.
Right.
It was a catastrophic disaster. It leveled Tokyo, killed over 100,000 people. The devastation was just apocalyptic, with fires sweeping through all these wooden houses.
I can't even imagine.
And amidst this horrifying, gruesome landscape, Haigo did something really shocking. He took a 13-year-old Akira out into the smoldering ruins.
Just walking through the destruction.
Yeah. And when they came across these massive piles of human corpses and animal carcasses, Akira, naturally, tried to look away. But Haigo grabbed him and forced him to look directly at the carnage.
Oh my God.
He commanded his little brother to confront the horror head-on, telling him that looking at it was the only way to conquer his fear of it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you think about the psychology there, that is a brutal, almost unimaginable form of exposure therapy.
It really is.
To force a 13-year-old child to stare at mass death so he stops being afraid of it.
It's intensely traumatic. But what's fascinating here is how that unflinching eye eventually found its medium. Because he learned in that moment not to look away from the mud, the blood, and the grotesque reality of human suffering.
But he didn't immediately go into film, did he?
No, he didn't. He actually spent his early 20s training as a Western-style painter. He was part of this avant-garde art movement, but he just couldn't make a living at it. He was essentially a starving artist. And eventually, in 1936, he just needed to pay the bills. So he answered a newspaper ad for an assistant director at a film studio.
The crazy thing is that failure as a painter actually became his cinematic superpower.
Exactly. When he stepped onto a film set, he brought his canvas with him.
How does that actually translate, though? Because, a painting is static, but a movie is constantly moving.
It translates through his absolute obsession with composition and spatial geometry. He had been studying Western directors, especially the American master John Ford.
Oh, the legendary Western director.
Right. Ford was famous for using deep focus compositions, where the foreground, the middle ground, and the background are all crisp and active at the same time.
Okay, I see.
Kurosawa took those techniques, but applied the meticulous layered framing of a painter. He wasn't just pointing a camera at actors. He was arranging every single shadow, every tree branch, every extra in the background to create a perfectly balanced, moving painting.
So he works his way up the studio system with this painter's eye and this really unflinching stomach for reality. But let's fast forward to the moment his unique vision actually explodes onto the global stage. It's 1950, and he releases Rashomon.
Rashomon was an absolute earthquake in world cinema.
Just a total game changer.
Completely. In 1951, it shockingly won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival. And then the following year, it won an Honorary Academy Award in the U.S.
Which was unheard of for a Japanese film at the time.
Right. This single film kicked the...
Contradictory how? Like, they just disagree on slightly different details.
No, I mean, completely mutually exclusive realities.
Wow.
Yeah. So the bandit claims it was this wildly honorable epic sword duel. The wife claims she was a helpless victim who fainted and maybe killed her husband in a trance.
And the husband is dead, so he can't testify.
Actually, he does. The dead samurai speaks through a psychic medium, and he claims he tragically killed himself out of grief and shame.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then finally, a woodcutter who secretly watched the whole thing claims they were all just pathetic cowards who fought this bumbling, embarrassing skirmish.
So the audience is just left hanging. There's no definitive, neatly wrapped up truth revealed at the end.
None whatsoever. Kurosawa forces you to realize that human memory is inherently self-serving and unreliable. We all cast ourselves as the heroes or the tragic victims of our own stories.
Yeah, it is brilliant.
And the structural audacity birthed a storytelling device we now literally call the Rashomon effect.
Right, and this is where my mind was just blown by the source material. You take this profound, heavy philosophical puzzle about the nature of objective truth, and it trickles down into the most unexpected places. It becomes a total staple of television comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources point out that classic sitcom episodes of The Dick Van Dyke Show and All in the Family, they actually use this exact structure. Wait, so you're telling me that a 1950s Japanese samurai film is the direct ancestor of a sitcom trope used by Dick Van Dyke and Archie Bunker?
I'm telling you exactly that. They totally lifted the blueprint.
That is wild. Like Rob and Laura Patry having a marital spat, and the episode shows Rob's version where Laura acts like a screaming banshee, and then Laura's version where Rob is a tyrannical monster. That entirely traces back to Rashomon.
It does. And it's a perfect example of Kurosawa as the ultimate bridge. Rashomon proved to the Western world that foreign language films could offer universal, structurally audacious templates that transcended cultural boundaries.
It's just a brilliant narrative device about human ego.
Right, and it works just as perfectly in a 16th century Japanese forest as it does in a 1960s American living room.
Okay, so Rashomon fundamentally rewrites how stories can be structured. But his next masterpiece, Seven Samurai in 1954, completely revolutionizes how movies are physically filmed. It basically establishes the modern action blockbuster.
Yes, and it was a famously grueling production to get there. This is the era where he earned the nickname Kurosawa Tenno, which translates to the Emperor.
Because he was so demanding, right?
Exactly. He was an absolute authoritarian on set. He had this terrifying, budget-busting perfectionism that routinely drove studio executives to the brink of nervous breakdowns.
Yeah, the sources mentioned that a decade earlier for his 1944 propaganda film, The Most Beautiful, he demanded this level of immersion from his actors that bordered on psychological torture.
Oh, the factory story.
Yeah, He made his actresses live in a real factory. They had to eat actual terrible factory food, sleep in the dorms, and call each other by their character names off camera.
All just to get an authentic look of exhaustion on their faces.
It's madness. But he gets results.
He does. And he brought that exact same relentless intensity to Seven Samurai. But the true revolution of that film wasn't just the acting methods. It was deeply technical.
Right, let's talk about the cameras.
Before Kurosawa, action was largely shot with a single camera. A director would set up a shot, film a heavily choreographed sword swing, yell cut, move the camera, and film the reaction.
So it felt very staged.
Very staged. But Kurosawa started shooting action with multiple cameras running simultaneously to capture spontaneous reality. If a horse reared unexpectedly, or an actor slipped and fell in the mud, all the cameras caught it from different angles, and it went into the final film.
And he kept pushing this further, didn't he?
Oh yeah. In his later modern crime procedurals like High and Low, he was sometimes running up to 9 cameras at the exact same time.
Here's where it gets really interesting if you think about it. Using multiple cameras to capture unpredictable movement. It is essentially like inventing the modern live sports broadcast.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal analogy.
Because he treated a samurai battle not like a carefully rehearsed theater play, but like a live-action collision. The cameras were just, positioned in the stands to catch the chaos as it naturally unfolded.
And to heighten that live sports feeling of being right in the middle of the crush, he revolutionized the use of telephoto lenses.
Break that down for us. What does a telephoto lens actually do to the image on screen?
Well, a telephoto lens is a lens that zooms way in from a great distance. Traditional Japanese sword fight films, which were known as chanbara, were shot with wide lenses.
So you could see the whole room.
Right. They featured very clean, ballet-like, highly theatrical swordplay, but Kurosawa hated that artificiality. A telephoto lens physically compresses the visual space. It makes the background look like it's crashing right into the foreground.
Oh, so it flattens everything together.
Exactly. By using these lenses, he visually flattened the charging horses, the screaming villagers, and the samurai into one suffocating layer. It throws the audience right into the claustrophobic, muddy realism of the battle.
Muddy is definitely the operative word there, too, because he never just lets the actors fight in a nice, sunny, dry field.
No, never.
The weather in his films isn't just background detail. It is actively weaponized against the characters.
He used weather as a deliberate emotional texture. You have the heavy, oppressive, unrelenting rain in the climactic battle of Seven Samurai.
Which just looks exhausting to fight in.
And then you have the freezing, biting wind stirring up dust in Yojimbo, or the eerie, disorienting fog in Throne of Blood.
Which was his samurai adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, right?
Yes, heavily influenced by the masks and ghostly movements of traditional Japanese no theater. The fog in that is basically its own character.
So he's assaulting your eyes with rain and telephoto compression, but he is also messing with your ears. This was fascinating to me. Working with his composer, Fumio Hayasaka, Kurosawa basically rejected the standard Hollywood habit of using music to just spoon-feed the mood to the audience.
Right. The concept they pioneered together was musical counterpoint.
How does that work?
Well, instead of playing sad, weeping strings during a tragic scene, they would play cheerful, upbeat music against a scene of absolute emotional devastation.
Which feels so counterintuitive.
It does, but you see this most powerfully in his contemporary drama, Ikiru.
Describe that scene, because it is just legendary.
So Ikiru is about an aging, dying bureaucrat who realizes his life has been completely meaningless. And he spends his final days fighting City Hall just to build a children's playground in a slum.
It's a beautiful premise.
In the iconic scene, this dying old man is sitting on a swing in the playground he finally built. It's in the freezing snow in the dead of night. But instead of playing a tragic, sweeping score, Kurosawa has the man softly singing a gentle, romantic, upbeat song about how life is short and you should fall in love. Wow. And the juxtaposition of this cheerful tune with the visual of a freezing man at the absolute end of his life, it heightens the suffering far more than a sad violin ever could. It breaks your heart by refusing to ask for your pity.
That is just incredible filmmaking.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, all of these technical innovations, the multiple cameras catching mistakes, the telephoto compression, the aggressive weather, the counterpoint sound Kurosawa is completely destroying the old, simple, stock character feeling of period films.
He's making it real.
He replaced it with kinetic spatial geography. It's so meticulously crafted that modern action directors still study Seven Samurai today like it's a sacred textbook for how to stage complex action.
And because he invented this incredibly dynamic visual grammar, the next generation of Western filmmakers eagerly stole it, which creates this amazing, fascinating cultural feedback loop.
It really is a loop.
I mean, he loved American Westerns by guys like John Ford. He takes that grammar and makes Japanese samurai films, and then those samurai films are turned back into American Westerns and space operas by Hollywood.
The examples of this transcultural loop are just staggering. Seven Samurai is the ultimate men on a mission movie, assembling a team of rogues to defend a village. It was directly remade in Hollywood as the classic Western The Magnificent Seven in 1960.
And Kurosawa actually loved the remake, didn't he? I read he loved it so much he sent the director, John Sturges, a ceremonial Japanese sword as a gift.
He did, but, he wasn't always so thrilled with the borrowing.
Right, the Sergio Leone situation.
Yeah, exactly. A few years later, his cynical, violent samurai film Yojimbo, which is about a nameless ronin playing two rival gangs against each other, was famously remade as A Fistful of Dollars by Sergio Leone.
And that's the movie that launched the spaghetti western craze and made Clint Eastwood a massive cigar-chewing star.
Right, but it was completely unauthorized. It was so brazenly copied, shot for shot in some places, that Kurosawa wrote a very polite but very firm letter to Leone.
I love this quote from the sources. He wrote to Leone, "It's a very fine film, but it's my film."
A devastating critique.
So polite, but so brutal.
And Kurosawa was successfully sued for 15% of the movie's worldwide revenue.
Good for him.
Then, of course, you have George Lucas. Lucas was fundamentally influenced by Kurosawa's 1958 film The Hidden Fortress when he was writing the original Star Wars.
Oh, the structural influence there is undeniable. Because The Hidden Fortress tells this grand, epic story of a badass general and a rebel princess, but it tells it entirely from the perspective of two bickering, lowly, greedy peasants who are just trying to survive the chaos.
Right.
And Lucas lifted that exact narrative point of view and turned those two bickering peasants into R2-D2 and C-3PO.
It's true. And what's vital to realize here is how the new Hollywood generation directors like Spielberg, Scorsese, Lucas, Coppola, John Milius, how they viewed Kurosawa. They didn't just see him as a cool influence to mine for plot points. They viewed him as their sensei.
They really revered him.
They did. They looked at how Kurosawa took the samurai film, which was considered pretty cheap, disposable entertainment in Japan at the time, and elevated it into high, serious art.
And they wanted to do the same thing.
Exactly. These American directors took that as a mandate to do the exact same thing with American genre films. They wanted to take the Western, the sci-fi picture, the monster movie, the gangster film, and elevate them into cinematic art using Kurosawa's grammar.
But, and there is always a but in these stories of monumental artistic success, being the godfather of modern cinema didn't protect Kurosawa from the harsh realities of the film business.
No, it didn't.
Which leads us to a really tragic fall from grace in his later years and an unexpected rescue.
It's a sad chapter. Because despite his global fame and the absolute reverence he commanded abroad, Kurosawa struggled deeply in his home country of Japan as he got older.
Why was that?
Well, the Japanese film industry was changing. Television was eating into box office profits, budgets were tightening, and a lot of Japanese critics actually turned on him.
Really?
Yeah, they dismissed his work as macho or immature, or ironically, they said he was catering too much to foreigners, that his work was too Western.
The prophet has no honor in his hometown. He became a dinosaur to the studio system he helped build.
It's exactly that. By the 1970s, he had suffered a string of severe financial failures. He was unceremoniously fired from the Hollywood Pearl Harbor epic Tora, Tora, Tora after years of pre-production.
Which had to be humiliating.
And he was suddenly unable to secure funding anywhere in Japan. And in 1971, falling into a profound depression, Kurosawa attempted suicide by slashing his throat multiple times.
That is it's heartbreaking to hear. A man whose eye had literally reshaped global culture, bleeding out in a bathtub because the industry decided he was obsolete.
It is a dark, agonizing moment. The man who had given so much life to the cinema felt he had absolutely nothing left to live for without a canvas.
But he survived.
He survived the attempt, and he was ultimately rescued by the foreign reverence he had unknowingly cultivated.
The rest of the world basically stepped in and said, "We will not let you stop painting."
Exactly. The Soviet Union reached out first and financed his next film, Dersu Uzala, which he shot in the freezing wilderness of Siberia.
Naturally freezing wilderness.
Of course. And it ended up winning an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film. And later, his famous American fanboys stepped up. George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola used the massive, untouchable industry clout they had just earned from Star Wars and The Godfather to essentially strong-arm 20th Century Fox into helping finance Kurosawa's 1980 samurai epic Kagemusha.
I can just imagine Lucas and Coppola at the absolute height of their power, utterly baffled that Japanese studios weren't throwing money at their hero.
Lucas famously said it was like telling Michelangelo he wasn't allowed to paint anymore.
Wow.
And their intervention worked perfectly. Kagemusha won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, completely reviving his lead career. It restored his confidence and allowed him to secure funding for his final sweeping masterpiece, Ran, which was an apocalyptic, visually stunning adaptation of Shakespeare's King Lear.
So what does this all mean? We've talked a lot about multi-camera setups, telephoto lenses, and the Rashomon effect. And it's so easy to just get lost in the kinetic action, the muddy battles, and the technical wizardry. But beneath the blood and the mud of his epics, there's a pulse to his work.
A deep humanity.
Yes, his films were driven by a profound spiritual humanism. You look back at Ikiru, the dying bureaucrat fighting for a playground. Kurosawa's ultimate legacy is his belief that a person is defined not by their class or their wealth or their social standing, but by the choices they make when faced with a rigid, conformist society.
This raises an important question, though, about the staggering cost of that kind of genius.
Right.
Because Kurosawa's relentless quest to find cinematic beauty, his authoritarian demand for absolute perfection on set, and his unflinching search for deep emotional truth, it alienated him.
It pushed people away.
It alienated him from his own domestic film industry, it isolated him from his peers, and it drove him to the absolute brink of his own life. Yet that exact same relentless, stubborn drive is what united him with audiences and filmmakers across the entire globe. He suffered immensely under the weight of his own vision, but in doing so, he created a universal language that we all still speak.
Which brings it all back to you, listening right now. The next time you sit down on your couch to watch a movie or a prestige TV show, every time you watch a morally ambiguous, gritty anti-hero step into the frame, every time you see a chaotic action sequence captured from 5 different angles at once, making you feel the impact in your chest,
Yep.
every time you watch a story being told from shifting, unreliable perspectives that force you to question the truth, you are essentially watching the artistic children of Akira Kurosawa. The brutal exposure therapy he suffered in the flaming ruins of the 1923 earthquake eventually gave the entire world a new way to see.
It really is a monumental legacy to leave behind. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought, drawn directly from Kurosawa's own self-assessment of his life.
Okay.
He once famously said, "Take myself, subtract movies, and the result is 0." I invite you to ponder that level of absolute devotion. What does it actually mean for an artist to be so completely consumed by their craft, so entirely dedicated to the canvas, that they literally have no identity, no existence outside of it?
A heavy, beautiful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an absolute pleasure exploring the Emperor's legacy with you. Until next time, keep watching closely.
Take care, everyone.